Today, we are going to discuss politics of language in India. You can also frame this lecture as language and politics in India or linguistic politics in India. As we know that India is a country where several populations having very different languages, they cohabit together, they stay together. In other words, it is a bit different from the European notion of the nationhood. The European concept of nation is one nation, one culture, one language. But in India, you have one country, one nation, but you have very different languages and very different kind of cultures. If you look at Hindi, which is largely spoken in various parts of India, specifically in the northern part of India, a kind of amalgamated population of Hindi is still the half the population of India. Now, in this respect, we have the concept of diversity in India in terms of what we say as unity in diversity. But India is more than unity in diversity, rather it is unity with diversity. And we will today, we are going to discuss that how that the recognition of linguistic diversity is a very important feature of the Indian nation state. Before independence, the colonial powers, they first inculcated the medium of instruction as an English in various colleges and universities, particularly in the colonial during the colonial period, in order to equip a native officials who will support or and at the same time who will also cooperate with the British administration. Now, after independence, the constitution has provided the scope for the populations to learn in various languages and also educate themselves in various languages. Now, the game of political use of language has been often contested between English, Hindi, and regional languages. Also, there was an issue of the Hindi-Urdu controversy, and this whole Hindi-Urdu controversy precisely poses us this question that how the politicization of language is possible. Because in the colonial period, both Hindi and Urdu were not identified with a particular religion. And certainly in the early colonial period, the Hindi and Urdu were spoken by various different religions. So let's say Urdu was spoken not only by Muslims but also by Hindus and Punjabis. Whereas Hindi was also spoken by both Muslims and Hindus. But from the colonial times, particularly late colonial times, the politicization of the Hindi-Urdu controversy that happened, and then this whole construction, the political construction of and the political identification with Hindi and Hindu, whereas Muslim and Urdu, that became evident. So there is a kind of a political construction of the Hindustan. And in today's lecture, we are going to discuss that this whole Hindustan, how that was also challenged by certain linguistic groups, particularly in Tamil Nadu, where the southern India had a very different kind of a response, where the Aryanization of India, they thought that there is a kind of a linguistic hegemony of Hindi over the southern languages, particularly in the Tamil, Kannada, Telugu, and the Malayalam languages. Also in the eastern India, they also supported this idea of Hindi. This whole idea that Hindi is getting kind of dominating other languages. So there was these debates that we will come to this lecture. Now, the Constituent Assembly was faced with several linguistic issues. One of the major issues was indeed the linguistic division of India, a demand the Congress had never earlier fully rejected. So it was a kind of a half-hearted attempt that we could think about that, but it was not fully rejected. Neither it was fully accepted. So the Congress position during the Constituent Assembly was a bit ambivalent, a kind of ambiguous position. There were also the questions of national and or the official language, its script. And how the languages would be used, that kind of an argument also came up in the Constituent Assembly. Then the issue of the linguistic minorities, that was another issue which was debated in the Constitution. Then the issue of what mode of form of language should modern Indian education institutions would follow. So what would be the medium of instruction in universities and colleges? What would be the linguistic medium in courts? That was also another issue which was very much discussed in the Constituent Assembly. Then the role of English and how it should be used in the place of Hindi, if Hindi is not getting used everywhere, because so let's say in southern and eastern India, most of the population, people they don't understand Hindi. So English become a kind of a bridge between the Hindi and the non-Hindi speakers. So that was another issue which was discussed in the Constituent Assembly. Now, the conclusions of the debates that led to several provisions regarding the language in the Indian Constitution, that we must now discuss. Now, in the Indian Constitution, Articles 343 to 351, so that 9 articles, which comes under the 8th schedule, deal with the issues of languages in the country. Now, Hindi in the Devanagari script is the official language of the Union as per the Constitution, and several, according to that early provision in the Constitution, is the official language of the Union, and several special directives had also been given for the promotion and development of Hindi in Article 351. It was to be constantly enriched, according to the Constitution, by borrowing from other Indian languages and drawing whenever necessary or desirable for its vocabulary, primarily on Sanskrit and secondarily on other languages. Now, according to Article 343, Clause 2, the Constitution provides for the use of English for all official purposes for a period of 15 years. So, in other words, the Constitution was put into operation on the 26th of January 1950. Now, from then on, the next 15 years, which is till 1965, 26th January, English would be the official language for a period of 15 years. That was according to the Article 343, Clause 2. However, by 1965, widespread riots in southern India and happened, and it happened. Those riots were the result of the fears of domination of Hindi and Aryanization. So an Aryanization of the Dravida kind of language. So the Dravidians, particularly in South India, the Dravid movement, they first argued that, look, there is a kind of a Hindi domination over South. So with the fears of this whole Hindiization and the Aryanization of the Dravida land, there were linguistic riots. And that made it very clear that the English should not be completely demoted from its official status. It took 66 deaths and 2 self-immolations in the anti-Hindi student agitation in Tamil Nadu for the government, the central government, to realize that a language could not be imposed on any persons against their wishes, and that repression of a student movement would automatically involve parents, teachers, and the whole community. So English was assured the status of the associate official language by 1965. The Constitution provides that English will be the language of the High Courts, Supreme Court, and Acts of Parliament. The Constitution also provides for the rights of its citizens to make representation in any language to the state. It was the amended Official Language Act of 1967. Another development was the political realization that the battle of regional languages, which is the majority languages in different linguistic states, to contain the supremacy of Hindi had better chances of winning by having English as the contestant against Hindi rather than the regional languages themselves. This realization was shared by many states in the southern, eastern, and northeastern parts of India. Which is besides Tamil Nadu. So Tamil Nadu was one of the spearheading state against Hindi, but that kind of a concern of that there is a Hindi supremacy over other linguistic states, this kind of a concern of Tamil Nadu was shared by other southern states as well as other eastern and northeastern states. Now, this act, which is the Official Language Act, that became possible because of the changed political equations, including the rise of regional political parties. Now, remember, from the 1967 onwards is also the emergence of the regional political parties. In the 1967, the Congress lost elections in 8 important states, including in Tamil Nadu and in West Bengal. And it actually gave rise to this whole emergence of the regional political parties, and that was also very instrumental in kind of contesting Hindi, not only by English, but now with the emergence of regional languages, that is also very much evident now. So it is kind of synchronizing with the developments in Indian politics. The rise of the regional political parties in the many states and the changed attitudes towards English from being a language of political oppression to a language of progress, from a language of economic deprivation of the rural masses to a language of centrally planned development for all, from a divisive language of the administration to unifying language of the constitution, and from a language of political inequality to a language of ethnic neutrality. And these were the issues that was now being debated. With the emergence of the regional political parties and with the emergence of the regional politics, the Official Language Act made the central government responsible for the development of regional languages in the states as languages of the nation, not just of their regions alone, and that's very significant. The makers of the constitution felt it necessary to make a list of major Indian languages in the 8th schedule. As Granville Austin, the political scientist, who is also the constitutional expert, pointed out, the major advantage was really psychological, particularly for those who feared the domination of the protagonists of Hindi. It was an open list and more languages could be added to it. The inclusion, on the other hand, would cost almost nothing to the state in financial or administrative terms, but would lend a distinct aura to the language to be included, on the other hand, in the 8th schedule. Now, the first language to be included in the schedule was Sindhi. The 1992 amendment introduced Konkani, Manipuri, and Nepali, bringing the number of languages to 18. So now in the 8th schedule, 18 languages are being recognized after several amendments that we have just pointed out. 4 more languages were added in December 2003: Bodo, Santhali, Maithili, and Dogri, bringing the total number to 22. So as of now, you have now 22 languages which are now being recognized in the 8th schedule of our constitution. As in each of the foregoing cases, the politics of each is specific, but at the root of it all are questions of psychological insecurity, community pride, and national recognition. When the 1961 census noticed that the number of Hindi speakers was declining and people were claiming their languages, their mother tongue, as Bhojpuri, Awadhi, or Maithili, Braja, Bundeli, etc., as their native languages, the the central government, by the 1971 census, decided to include all of them under the rubric of Hindi. So, so Bhojpuri, Awadhi, Maithili, Braja, Bundeli, they all came under Hindi. To the Maithilis, this was a completely unacceptable situation because, they speak Maithili and not Hindi, which is very different. Now, the then Prime Minister had promised to have their language included in the 8th schedule, and he did so. The government also decided to include Dogri to win back the confidence of the people of Jammu region, once again a very sensitive area. The 8th schedule is rather obliquely referred to in Articles 344 Clause 1 and 351 of the Constitution in the context of enriching Hindi. Over a period of time, the 8th schedule languages have acquired a special status in the Indian polity in terms of administration, education, films, and literary awards. Now, we are going to discuss on the linguistic reorganization of states. India remains a land of many languages, as we know, each of it with a very distinct script, grammar, vocabulary, and literary traditions. Rather than deny this diversity, the Congress sought to give space to it. As early as 1917, 1917, the party had committed itself to the creation of linguistic provinces in a free India. In fact, after the Nagpur session of the Congress in 1920, this principle was extended and formalized with the creation of Provincial Congress Committees, PCCs, by linguistic zones. The Karnataka Pradesh PCC, Orissa PCC, Maharashtra PCC, etc. A point to be noted is that these did not follow and were often at odds with the administrative divisions of British India. Nehru and Gandhi were both active proponents of this reorganization principle. Nehru, appreciative of the linguistic diversity of India, wrote in his 1937 essay that our provincial languages are no dialects or vernaculars, as the ignorant sometimes call them. They are ancient languages with a rich inheritance, each spoken by many millions of people, each tied up inextricably with the life and culture and ideas of the masses as well as the upper classes. However, this marked Nehru's view in 1937. It was an earlier position of Nehru. Nehru changed his position later on. A decade later, he questioned the very premise of linguistic reorganization. Remember, in another 10 years, he is kind of contradicting his own position. In 1947, the country gone through a violent partition on the basis of religion and faced onslaught of millions of refugees from East and West Pakistan, an undeclared war in Kashmir, the nuances of formulating a new constitution, the scheduling of elections, and the need for executing strong economic policies, these were certain issues which made Nehru to rethink about his 1937 position of creating states on the basis of linguistic identities. Dividing it further on the basis of language would only serve to weaken the union. That was what Nehru's position now, which is like in 1947. In his speech to the Constituent Assembly 3 months after independence, he further voiced the priorities of the government as in the following words: the first essential is therefore for India as a whole to be strongly and firmly established, confident in her capacity to meet all possible dangers and face and meet all problems. If India lives, all parts of India also live and prosper. If India is enfeebled, all her component claimants grow weak. The creation of linguistic provinces was to be deferred until such a time when India was consolidated and strong. Nehru's stance had the support of Patel and C. Rajagopalachari. Under Patel's jurisdiction, a committee was appointed under S.K. Dhar, a judge of the Allahabad High Court in 1948, which declared that though the force of popular sentiment remained strong, in the prevailing unsettling conditions, the first and last need of India at the present moment is that it should be made a nation. The verdict caused discontent among large sections of the assembly as most Congress members who spoke Marathi insisted on a separate state of Maharashtra. Similar were the aspirations of the leaders, Congress leaders whose mother tongue was Telugu, Kannada, Malayalam, or Odia. To assuage the members, a fresh committee was appointed in December 1948, which was called the JVP committee after the initials of its members. Jawaharlal Nehru, so J for Jawaharlal Nehru, Vallabhbhai Patel, so V, and the Pattabhi Sitaramaiah, P. It, however, reinstated the earlier position and argued that language was not only a binding force but also a separating one, and that the primary consideration must be the security, unity, and economic prosperity of India. The report submitted by the JVP committee has been described as cold water therapy by Robert King, as it slowed things down for a while, but fire soon started again in 1948 and 1949 with a kind of renewed enthusiasm for linguistic autonomy. Campaigns existed for Samyukta Greater Karnataka, aiming to unite Kannada speakers across the states of Madras, Mysore, Bombay, and Hyderabad. Samyukta Maharashtra, which aimed to bring together Marathi speakers in a single political unit. The Malayalis too wanted a state of their own based on the merger of the princely states of Cochin and Travancore with Malabar, and there existed a Maha-Gujarat movement. Different from these set of demands was a struggle for a Sikh state in the Punjab. These brought together claims of language as well as religion. Now, it precisely happened that the linguistic reorganization of states were very much a product of this whole tussle between this whole idea of the unity and the idea of the diversity. What India has actually done is that as whether it is the creation of the linguistic reorganization state, whether it's the creation of the Punjab or Maharashtra, the Gujarat, Andhra Pradesh. In the older Bengal Suba, you have the Bengal, Orissa, Assam, and Bihar, and each has their own language. Except Bihar, who speaks the majority of the people speak Hindi. Bengal, Orissa, and Assam, they all speak their native languages, which are different from Hindi. In other words, the idea of diversity, the recognition of diversity, was very much foregrounded by Indian Indian parliamentarians who amended the constitution later on. And as historian Ramachandra Guha believes that the creation of linguistic states was, among other things, a victory of the popular will. It was the people who wanted this change, and it is only happening because there are conditions of representative democracy in India. When it began, the movement for linguistic states generated deep apprehensions among the nationalist elite. They feared it would lead to the Balkanization of India, to the creation of many more Pakistans. Now, evidently, that didn't happen. And if you contrast with the 1952, Times of India, what Times of India was saying in the 1952, and I'm quoting that, and Times of India in the February 1952 say that any attempt at redrawing the map of India on the linguistic basis would only give the long-awaited opportunity to the reactionary forces to come into open and assert themselves. Now, certainly, that did not happen. India did not broke apart. Even if you had linguistic reorganization of states, even if you have newer states with their local languages, India did not broke up. That will that will lay an X at the very root of India's integrity. Well, that was the concern that with the linguistic reorganization of states would do, but that is precisely didn't happen. The movements for linguistic states, however, revealed an extraordinary depth of popular feeling and redefined what it meant to be Indian. Thank you very much.